Summit League Women's Basketball Coaches Roundtable as a precursor to Media Day, joined by North Dakota State University head coach Jory beginning his first year, University of South Dakota head coach Dawn Plitzuweit. Thank you very much for taking a few minutes just to talk about some things that aren't specifically related to the things you've been working on for the last few weeks. Just some topics in general, the landscape, and one of the hot button issues right now that we're seeing across the country, everywhere from local and state governments, is the Fair Pay to Play Act, basically allowing student athletes to potentially make monetary gain off of their name and likeness. And I don't know that anybody really knows how it will be implemented, but it sounds like they're going to try to get something done somehow, some way. So I'm just going to ask you some general thoughts. I'll start with you, Coach Collins. What do you think the impact would be on your sport, your program specifically, and then maybe just some things in general?
Yeah, that's a tough question, how it's going to affect the women's game, especially at our level. When you're talking about being paid for some of those things, when you first think of that, you think of the top 1%, some elite players, people that are really a national brand that are going to be receiving maybe some opportunities to do that. How it's going to affect the women's game in general and those specific players at the elite schools compared to how it will affect our league. I don't think anybody knows.
Right.
I think in theory it's probably a good idea the way things are changing in the game. But like everything else, the details on how that gets done is what's going to be, most important.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point. I don't know that anybody knows what those details are. Coach Plitzuweit.
Well, I believe the Fair Pay to Play Act is something that the NCAA has about 4 years to figure out before it goes into effect right now. And so first of all, I'd say I think it's great for student athletes to be able to be in a situation now where our student athletes receive cost of attendance. And that was a hot button topic years ago. And I think that has really made a difference for our student athletes. It's taken some pressure off of them during the course of the summer, even during the school year, to make some money, to be able to do things that other students have the opportunity to do, and now our student athletes do. And I think this act is something that further down the line, I see the impact on women's basketball potentially going to the effect of changing some of our rules right now in terms of eligibility to play professionally and to play in the WNBA. Right now you have to graduate from college, or you have to be 4 years out from high school, you have to be 22 years old. One of those three has to happen. And so I could see this, if this goes into fruition like it looks like right now, affecting some of the top players potentially leaving earlier than they have been, which I think then, if that happens, changes the way our game is in terms of parity as well. Our game is very different from the men's game for a lot of reasons when it comes to parity in the NCAA tournament, with the number of scholarships we have, with the fact that players don't leave early, with the fact that we're not playing on neutral sites. All of that makes it more difficult in our sport to have the same type of parity as in the men's game. And so I do think that it's going to be interesting to follow, and I think it could end up being very positive in terms of women's basketball in years to come.
Yeah, that's a great point when you talk about some of those elite players leaving early and how it might change the competitive landscape on the women's game as a whole. So thank you. Great points on that. One of the things that the NCAA did is they put a committee together, which they're great at doing, and looked at a strategic plan as far as promoting and continuing to elevate the women's game. What are some things that they can do? Some of the general things they came up with that they said is, we want to unify and grow the women's basketball community. We want to empower student athletes to reach full potential. We want to celebrate and elevate the game, and we want to create an inspiring experience for all involved. Again, very general, but I think no one can question the move of women's college basketball on the national level right now. I think the increased interest, the popularity, just the quality of the tournament the last number of years. What are some of your individual thoughts on how you can keep that momentum going and take advantage of it? I'll start with you, Coach Plitzuweit.
Well, I think certainly I feel very, very fortunate to coach in the state of South Dakota, where fans here are so engaged in the women's game. And so it makes it such a unique and special opportunity for our young ladies to play in front of a sold-out crowd or to play in front of 2,400 fans a game. So what I appreciate the fact that the women's game is continuing to look at ways to grow our sport and make it, in terms of equity, make it more equitable, to make it a sport that is more entertaining for fans to watch. I think some of the rule changes have done that in our game. The speed of the pace of the game has picked up. You can't foul at this point in time because putting your opponent at the free throw line for 2 rather than a 1-on-1 has changed a lot of how we play. The fact that you save your timeouts now, you don't use them, you don't burn one at the end of the first half because you have one left. You save them at the end of the game to advance the basketball. We have more sideline out of bounds plays than I've ever known. We didn't have any of those before. We had a line to get the ball in bounds, so it's changed, but it's made it so much more entertaining for the fans. And certainly, I think the way the rules continue to make the game faster this year with the addition of the 20-second shot clock or the reset after an offensive rebound or a kickball, some of those type of things will make the game, I think, even more entertaining for our fans. The only specific area that I've heard and we've been sent a survey on is looking at maybe changing how the NCAA tournament is set up the first round. If it goes from 4 teams to 8 teams, and what does that look like? And, I don't really know what the ramifications of that could be. I do know that in coaching at the Division II level, that's the way that tournament is set up. And if it's that way and you're playing 3 games in 4 days, it changes completely, changes some strategy, changes the way the tournament is designed. So, but it's worked really well at different levels, and I certainly support what they do, although change is hard for a lot of people, and coaches are in that same realm.
Right.
No question. Those are some great points. Coach Collins, your thoughts on
Yeah, I would just piggyback a little bit off Dawn. I think the game of women's basketball is so much better right now than it was even 10, 15 years ago. The going to the quarters, advancing the ball. This year with the shot clock only resetting to 20, there's going to be faster pace than there was, years ago. Don's an old Division II coach at the time, and myself, I know a couple years ago they experimented with hosting the championships together, the Division II championship and the Division I championship. I think that would be great if we're trying to unify all of women's basketball, to kind of have your champion. And the men don't need to do that necessarily, but I think it would be great if all of those could align. And we have a great Final Four weekend. We have a great clinic when we get there. The entire, WBCA does a great job, but I think it would be awesome to be able to go there and watch some Division II semifinal games and even Division III, and just have those all in the same place where coaches from all levels are getting a chance to be together and watch the product, because there's some really, really good basketball going on at those other levels as well.
Great observations. I appreciate that. And to kind of dovetail off that, you mentioned some of the rule changes and how positive they've been and how it's helped, it's forced you to adjust how you coach and what you emphasize and things along those lines. There's a G League experimental rule where they're talking about, if you get fouled on a 3-point shot, you just go to the free throw line, you shoot 1 free throw. If you make it, you get 3 points. If you don't, you miss. I think it's kind of a quirky rule, but what are some other thoughts that you have, and I like your forward thinking, on rule changes that you think could possibly continue to positively impact the women's game?
We feel like we've had a bunch here recently.
Yeah.
And it does make, you get in habits as a coach, and now all of a sudden you're throwing in new ones that changes your strategy all over the place. I know last year getting to watch some FIBA games over in Europe, a wider lane was interesting to see. Just opening up the middle of the floor a little bit. Their game is very fast-paced. But I really think the reset of the shot clock is going to be great, because there's just not, you get your offensive rebound, you get it back out. You don't have 30 seconds again to get through a possession. So there's some things that are great right now. But we're going to have to brainstorm about some others
Sure.
and keep it going that way.
Coach Plitzuweit, your thoughts?
Well, I think the interesting part of having the men's line behind our line this year is going to make it a challenge for women's basketball. And I say that after playing a few times here at the Pentagon with the NBA line, and then you have the college line, you have the high school line. Well, our young ladies were shooting from behind the NBA line, and so certainly that's going to present a little bit of a challenge for us this year. But I think that's something that's going to come out, and I think that'll happen for us too. I think that change will be made. Interestingly enough, the Summit League last year had 5 teams on the women's side that were in the top 34 in the country in three-pointers made. So that's what the Summit League, in my opinion, is the best three-point shooting conference I've ever seen. And to have 5 teams in the top 10% of the country in threes made is something that it'll be interesting to see how these rule changes continue to shift and to affect our league and the product that we put on the floor. And I do love the 20-second shot clock reset. I think that's going to speed up the pace of our game. I don't really know that I understand widening the lane. Jory's a lot smarter than I am with that when it comes to that. But I think that as time goes on, as we continue to speed the game up, I won't be surprised if in the next 10 years we get to the 24-second shot clock as well to continue the pace of play. But now that changes how you coach the game.
Right.
And we're a motion team, and at 24 seconds, after taking teams on foreign tours where you compete with the 24-second shot clock, you don't run motion. It doesn't work. You don't have enough time to pass the ball around. So it'll be interesting to see if we can, at some point in time, continue the pace of the play.
There'd be a lot of offensive philosophies changing.
Right, there would
with
be.
the 24-second clock.
As you shorten it, and it's interesting, to go from 30 to 24, that's your perception is going to change. And my guess is you're probably right, but that's one of the things that you want to do is make sure you're not trying to fix something that isn't broken
Right.
either.
Right.
And so, as you mentioned, the quality of play continues to improve. It makes sense to reduce the shot clock on an offensive rebound because you're not bringing the ball up the floor. So 20 seconds is okay to
Right.
execute and have.
Well, you even see in the women's game, how many years ago did they change the rule about the 10-second backcourt violation within the last
Right.
3 to 5 years?
Yep.
And that's really changed how teams handle press scenarios and handle pressing. Women's basketball, there weren't a lot of teams that pressed
Yep.
for a major part of the game, and now that you're starting to see that adjustment too.
Well, I really appreciate your perspective on a number of different topics, and I wish you the absolute best heading into this 2019-2020 season, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Greg.